Let me tell you more about regressive autism and understanding a little bit about the components of how there is always a trigger. And I hope that's not triggering to some people, it might be, but that there are times where our children are going to seem like they are perfectly fine. And then there's this moment where it almost appears that our children are almost fading away from us. And first of all, hello, my name is Natalie Pelto. I am the co founder of Blue Life RX, and I am the creator of the Blue Life Autism program. And I have multiple nutritional certifications, including one in brain development and nutrition for children. And one of the areas that we do get asked a lot, I feel like my child is just like melting away from me. And this is a recurrent, even language that I'm using is how moms will describe watching their child go into regressive autism. And in some cases, there are very specific moments where there was a medical intervention. In some cases, there is nothing, it seems, that triggered the regression. But I will offer this. A lot of families don't realize that if the child goes through a picky eating phase, for example, here are three areas that we do see regressions that are not as talked about. If a child at around between the ages of 15 to 18 months go through a regression, sometimes maybe they're not even seeing their doctors or anything like that. It can come, but they all of a sudden became a picky eater. Well, these are the main stages where there is a huge burst of neurons that are just being created. The entire brain is being created. It's when we start to have autonomy. If we do not have on board the nutrients required to build out a human brain, then the brain cannot build itself properly, which means that there has to be a rewiring for survival, because the main organs in the body are always going to take precedence, and the brain, it has a lot of functions. Yes, it's not as important, we'll say, other than for triggering hormones, as much as, let's just say, the heart that keeps us alive and beating, and the liver and the gut. And so survival mode will always take precedence of the organs that need to be functioning, breathing, and these things. So for the brain, the main components that need to be running are maintained. But if we are lacking the ability to have, let's just say, enough omega 3s to create receptor sites and any type of messaging, both receptive, kids are receiving messages. If that receptor site is missing the message, then it never makes its way down the neuron, the axon, which is part of the messaging system right from the beginning, where, and omega 3s, for example, this is just one, right? Like there are many nutrients that are needed for just even maintenance of the neuron and the axons. But ideally, when we're looking at the neuroreceptor sites, but omega 3s, for example, just to go back to just as an example, if we do not consume omega 3s from either plant sources or even from fish sources or any kind of source, and we're seeing children that are eating 90% processed foods, it is not a surprise. It is actually a byproduct of what they're putting in their body, things that are blocking neuroreceptor building, and then things that are actually not even building out. So I hope that makes sense for many of you who have wondered a little bit. So that's number one, is that regression can easily come when we have our burst of neuronic activity of growth, if there are not enough nutrients to help the brain build itself. Now, we can always support this after. It takes a little bit of time. One of the things to realize is that neurons actually are the slowest growing cells that we have. But it is still possible. We can still work with synaptic connections as well. So we're not always super locked in. There is another time in our life where we do a big dump of neural pruning, which is usually during puberty. So if you're re-giving, again, if you can address all of these things like diet and support by the time they hit puberty, then they're going to have a really great outcome when they rebuild their neuron activity. So next is number two that we see in regression is surprisingly after illness. Not talked about enough, but what we have seen in our program as well is like kids that all of a sudden got COVID and then they regressed, they became picky eaters, and then they completely regressed due to the huge inflammatory response, an immune system response, which is why some programs focus only on immune support for autism as a recovery tool. So for us, what we do see is that it's never just one thing, and it could be a multitude of things, but supporting both the body itself and the immune system and all of its internal workings that connect and talk to each other is very important. And then number three, So after there's an illness, it can be like number two is like we can have a huge flash of inflammation. Now, from here, we do have to also ask ourselves, well, did it happen during the time where a child was building out all of these neural connections? What does that mean if there's that much inflammation in the brain? And then on top of that, if our children became picky through illness, which is very normal, our children generally don't eat a lot during illness, same as adults. So these are some of the areas, and then it's really hard to address mitochondrial support. That's kind of the other area that we're seeing as number three is just general inflammation from toxicity in the world that we live in. And for some families, they're like, we did everything right. We ate the organic foods, we did this, but the child might live in a very polluted city where there is a lot of mycotoxins, for example, and it can easily come from an area of mold and inflammation. Foundationally, looking at it as an inflammatory response in the body is really good, but usually those are the three different areas that we see children regress into. And I always, when a family tells me that their child regressed and there was no trigger, I always tell them there is somewhere some sort of trigger, whether it came from toxicity that we didn't know was around, or whether it came from depletion of the ability to build a healthy connections in the brain. And all of these things can be supported. So to end this video, if, for example, you feel that some of this has really resonated and you feel like you need a map or you need to have the right guidelines on how to help your child overcome some of these challenges, especially if for you didn't know where potentially autism came from, but regressive autism specifically, we knew our child was making milestones. So there has to be something that stopped their ability to move forward. And so we can always get those milestones back. So I hope that that is inspiring. If you want to learn more about that and how we help people, help families in the Blue Life Autism Program, make sure to watch the Three Secrets webinar below. It is a absolute valuable, it tells a little bit about our story, and it's a very good use of your time, and it will guide you through the strategies that we used for overcoming profound autism and helping my son get to the greatest gains possible. All right, make sure to like and subscribe if you found this valuable, and share it with someone who might also be questioning where autism happened for them.